you have to have your moment where you make your move and you be true to who you're supposed to be. And I get that that's not going to be really popular amongst some people. Like, wow, are you encouraging like strife and discord amongst couples? And I'm like, what I'm saying is you can't always be on the same page.
Hey, Kris, I got an interesting question for you today on this of all days, 14th of February, Valentine's Day.
2022. The one, like the Valentine's Day, the Valentine's
Day of 2022. Kris, have you and your wife ever fought about money?
So many times.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's rare. I don't think anybody ever fights about money in their marriage.
Well, so I actually, most people don't know this, but I actually have a degree from Brigham Young University in marriage and family human development.
Yeah.
It is basically understanding parenting and family formation and divorce and how to have a successful marriage. It's a precursor degree if you wanted to get a master's and head into psychology or counseling or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, I think a lot of people know that there are two main reasons for divorce, and they haven't changed, and they probably never will.
Really?
And it's either fighting over money or it's fighting over sex. Those are the two things that lead to the end of a relationship.
So I was being a bit facetious. I think we all know that money ends up being something that punches people's buttons, and when you don't agree on it inside of your marriage, it's complicated. And I thought today of all days would be really great to talk about love and money. And how do you make the two work together?
Well, it's interesting because there's this other adage. It's like this proven fact: opposites attract. If you're ever dating someone that is like the carbon copy of you, run, because you will hate this person. It won't take very long. You're destined to celebrate each other's differences if you want, I think, have the most successful relationship. And I like to think about it this way: like, why is that? Why, Kris? Why are you even bringing that up? Because it's why we have sex problems, it's why we have money problems. It's because we're so freaking different. Literally, women are entirely different species from man. We are so different from each other. Our wiring, our biology, like it's not like women are men, minus the beard. Some have that. We're way more different than that. And a lot of people don't really understand that it's the polarity that pulls us together that also leads to a lot of our challenges that we're meant to overcome.
Okay, so let's use money as an example. Did you and Colin always agree on what to do with money?
My wife came from a family, let's talk socioeconomic status.
Okay.
My wife came from a family that had money because they didn't spend money. They were extreme savers and budgeters. And her father ended up eventually getting into business, buying into his company, and ended up becoming a significant owner there, made really great money with them, and started making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then even had 7-figure years. So, but they didn't spend money like they had those things. They were always extraordinarily frugal, far more frugal than anyone would be with the amount of money that they had. They represented an extreme case. And so they filled my wife's head with really, good notions, well-intended notions like debt is evil, debt is bad, don't have debt at all costs, no matter what. If you have money, don't spend it, save it. And there's a lot of judgment, I think, that also kind of came with this idea that, money is something that you need to be as careful with as possible. And so my wife brought that to our relationship. My parents came from a similar socioeconomic status, meaning we were probably on the smaller end of, the middle class. But my dad, as a business owner, made a lot of money, but with 9 kids, he spent it all. My mom struggled to manage it. They were always refinancing the house every few years to get out of credit card debt. They never seemed to get ahead. They never seemed to have money in the bank. And my parents fought about money from not having it and from a philosophy of how it was to be managed. So when Glenn and I kind of came together, I had already made the decision. I do not want to repeat the upbringing of my parents, but I also found myself, frankly, turned off by the alternative of Glenn's parents' upbringing. While it was positive, it also felt limited just to me. Like there was something that still felt off, like, hey, that's a great path for a lot of people, but that's not my path. I'm not intended for that path. And so that meant that, even though we had only been married for a few short years, I started developing some wild, very ambitious notions about investing, making money, financial freedom. All of these thoughts were totally new to my wife. And so what we ended up fighting over, and it was more arguing than anything, was in the beginning, we didn't have money. Mm-hmm. And so, there was a moment that changed everything for me. It was the moment I came home. I'd been married for like 4 months. I had gone into marriage with 10 grand, which I blew on a ring, a brand new $1,500 Justy Subaru 1993 car, and a couple months worth of rent and tuition. And that was it. I ran out. So I got a full-time job right when we got married. And after having that full-time job for 4 months, I was not able to keep us from going into debt. And I remember coming home from work on a fairly discouraging day. I had just found out that month that I wasn't going to be a doctor because I hated chemistry, and I retook my OChem class and I couldn't nail it. I got a C- on my second go round instead of a C. And I finally listened to my advisor that said, this doesn't come natural to you, buddy. This is not your path. So I felt really disheartened by that because I'd planned on that for years. That was my plan to financially be okay. But I also just was having a lousy time at my telemarketing job that I hated. And when I came home on this lunch break, I found my wife in tears. And turns out, yes, it was because rent was due next week and we couldn't pay it. Yes, tuition was due in 3 weeks and we couldn't pay it. But the reason why she was crying is because it was the very first time in her life experiencing a bounced check. Because then we were writing checks and, there were debit cards, but it didn't go through. She was embarrassed. She had it was like $30 a grocery. She was so embarrassed that she left. And we had no food in our house at the time because we only kept 5 days worth of food at a time. And when I came home hours later, my wife was hungry. She was crying because she was hungry, and she was also just mentally blown from having no money. And she was so scared. And in that moment, I made a decision. I don't care what I have to do, as long as it's, legal.
Ethical.
I'm going to make sure that I never find myself in this situation again. And that's what got me to buck the system. That's when I said, screw college, meaning I'll get my degree. I don't even know if I'll use it. There's so much pressure. At my day and age, college was like you have to or you're an idiot. So I ended up getting my degree, but I knew already then it wasn't for career. It was for a variety of other reasons. And so I put myself through college to get that. I knew that I had to go outside the system. And that's when I basically started finding wealthy people. And I said, show me what you're doing and I will copycat it. And I did, and it worked.
I know in the beginning, Colleen was sort of in charge of keeping the books and making sure financially that, especially as you guys started investing, she kept track of all the cash flow and that. How'd that shift?
In the beginning, I made the money, and it was really weird. Colleen basically, she fantasized about being a mom. And we weren't ready to have kids yet, so she didn't want to get a job. She's like, I don't want to get a job. I want to be a mom. I'm like, yeah, but we're not having kids yet. And so she had a couple of little part-time thises and that. She just wanted to focus on finishing her school with a full-time. Her parents paid for her schooling. I had to pay for all of mine. And I just remember thinking, okay, this is a very, very different kind of human being. We have double standards going on. It's okay. I'm the breadwinner. Fine. But then I said, but I don't want to pay bills because I hate that stuff. I hate that minutia. So she would pay the bills. And for someone who's in fear and scarcity, paying the bills is also kind of terrifying because they have to work with what they got. And if there's not enough, then they're nagging you like, I need you to make some extra money or do something. And we were in that cat and mouse game where we were robbing Peter to pay Paul, never quite had enough. We were going deeper into debt into credit cards. And I started realizing that anytime I talked with my wife about money, it wasn't uplifting or positive. And that's when I said, you know what? I have to stop negotiating with this human being. I get that I'm married to her. I have to show her love and respect, but I got to change the agreement a little bit. She's not going to solve this. She's not going to make us more money. If anything, I'm going to get negative juju from her about money based on just her upbringing and where she's at. And I said, I hate that. So I said, this is on me. This is mine. I'm doing this. And in that moment, I said to myself, I just said, woman, I love you. My job's take care of you. I'm not going to include you in all the details of what that means because we don't exactly walk out of those conversations positive at this moment. So I'm just going to take it upon myself to figure out. So moved into a job that was 100% commission. That was terrifying. And at the same time, started working with a mentor to save money. I had a goal to save up $5,000 towards my very first property. And it took me 14 months to do that. And 14 months later, after scrimping and saving and me just saying, got to figure out this commission job, that year I doubled my income from $20,000 a year to basically $50,000. And $50,000 was enough to get out of debt, not necessarily get ahead, but get $5,000 in savings so that I could actually buy that first investment property.
Yeah.
And I remember when we did, my wife was scared. She was terrified. By the way, going back to polarity and opposites attract, you need the aggressive person. You need the dangerous person. You need the person that can take action to make stuff happen, not the other one. The other one is supposed to hit the brakes. The other one is supposed to be skeptical. The other one is supposed to say, let's make sure we're not messing up. Because if you've ever found a mutual couple where both of them are aggressive, they're going to be divorced in a few years. It's not good. And yet, at the time I thought, are my wife and I supposed to fight because we're different? No. Her skepticism brought balance to the force for us.
Yeah.
So here's what ended up going down. We bought that first house, and all of a sudden my wife's like, why are we doing this again? This house is a dump. Why are we doing this? I said, honey, because we're paying $400 a month to this hole in the ground, and that money gets thrown away. It's called rent. But if we buy this house, we become the landlord because we'll live upstairs 3 bedrooms instead of 1. We'll rent the basement. The basement is going to cover all of our, we're going to cover our mortgage. We're going to live for free. And she was skeptical, but she said, I didn't know I just said, I need you to trust me. Now I got to bring this up for a moment because often I talk to men and women where one of them is the aggressor and they don't feel supported by the other spouse. And I said, listen, love is not kneeling. Love is not bowing down. They love you to be you. Sometimes you got to honor your role, and that means that you're not going to get support from the person that wasn't designed to give it to you maybe in the first place with where they're at. You have to have your moment where you make your move and you be true to who you're supposed to be. And I get that that's not going to be really popular among some people. Like, wow, are you encouraging like strife and discord amongst couples? I'm like, what I'm saying is you can't always be on the same page. But when it's your primary, someone's got a primary duty. When my wife started having kids, I wasn't the primary, I was the secondary, she was the primary. When it comes to shopping for food, my wife's the primary. We're very traditional that way. When it comes to making money, I'm the primary. When it comes to leadership in our family, guess what? I'm the primary. It looks different for every single couple, but when you're the primary, you don't always get the luxury of support. Sometimes you don't even get the luxury of trust, but you have to know when you have to do your part for why they married you in the first place. So that's what I did when I bought that house, and my wife was terrified. 4 months later, she's starting to feel real good financially. And I'm like, honey, what's going on? She says, Kris, we have leftover money now because we're not paying money to rent. And with this leftover money, guess what I'm doing? I'm now paying off her bills. And it made her happy, and that made me happy. When I bought our second property, she was terrified. You're going to use a home equity line. I don't even know what that means, but the bank's going to give you this $18,000 loan, and you're going to use it to buy another property? We're not going to live in it. This isn't going to work out. I said, honey, I love you. Do you trust me? And I got probably the biggest false yes possible. She's like, yes. I'm like, good enough. I bought the property. I rented it out. We made $600 a month on it. And all of a sudden, 3 months later, my wife's even happy. I'm like, honey, how you doing? She's like, Kris, you got to come check this out. Look at the budget. I'm like, okay, show me what's going on. She's like, we literally have $1,000 extra a month that we didn't have before. The $400 that we're saving from renting from over a year ago. We also have this other $600 from this property, plus the down payment on this lease option they gave us of $3,000. And I said, well, what are you doing with the money? She says, I am 4 months away from getting us totally out of debt. And it made her happy. And a year later, I used the equity in that second property, bought my third, and then I bought my fourth, and then I bought my 10th. But it was after that second property that changed everything. She came to me and she said, Kris, when are we going to buy our third property? In that moment, I knew I had her. In that moment, I knew this woman, like, she now trusts me, and she wants me to do more of what's been working. Now, you're going to take a risk sometimes, folks, and that means that sometimes it's not going to work out. But you know what? If you're called to take that risk, there's no guarantees of anything in life, but you got to rise up and make your move. It worked out for me, but I got to tell you, the real moment for me came when I had to change my operating agreement in my marriage.
Okay, you're gonna have to let us know what that is, because I don't think most people have an operating agreement.
All right, first of all, does everyone understand here that when you start a business, that you give it a name and you talk to the IRS and they give it an identity, a social security number? I have a social security number, starts 534. Did you know that your business has a social security number? It's called a tax ID number. So when you get married, most people don't think about it this way, but it's not John and so-and-so, Jane, getting together and forming a family. They're actually forming an entity. They're giving birth to something new. My wife and I, we gave ours a name. We call it Bliss. So there's me, there's her, and then Bliss, which means us. Because sometimes what I'm doing is in service of us, and sometimes what I'm doing is in service of me, and sometimes what I'm doing is in service of her, and vice versa all the way around. And every business has an operating agreement. So when you file your articles of incorporation, this is where you're going to the state and saying, we're a thing. Just like when you file with the court and you're like, we are married.
Yeah.
But an operating agreement is like this many page document, maybe 30, 40, 50 pages that says, all right, these are our rules of how we do us. And I think that a lot of people get married that have informal rules that they never put in writing. Their operating agreements say things like, if you ever cheat on me, I'm going to destroy you. They have rules like, if you spend a certain amount of money and you don't tell me, there will be really nasty consequences, right? We have these rules of how we take care of each other. And so an operating agreement is meant to evolve as your relationship develops, as your business develops. And my relationship with my wife got to the point we were multi-millionaires, and she was still playing the scarcity nervous game about money. And every time we had to talk about money, I rolled my eyes in the back of my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk to this woman about money right now. Because it was never like, I was never going to leave that money like, yay, everything's going so great, skippity-doo, yeah.
Even when you were like, had lots of cash flow coming in.
It didn't matter to her. It didn't matter to her.
Huh.
Just, again, remember, different species. We're just built differently, right? You've got someone who's determined to have anxiety and worry, and the other person who's a little bit more free. You got the action taker in the relationship, and usually the less responsible. You have the one who naturally leads and the one who follows. These aren't bad things. You need to embrace this. The biggest mistake I made in the beginning of my marriage was assuming that my wife had to be like me.
Yeah.
I'm taking the lead here. I need you to be at my side. We'll take the lead together. I'm going to the gym. You need to go to the gym. That didn't work out so well.
No.
It was, if I feel like I need to go to the gym, then I need to honor myself and go to the gym. So my wife and I started, we got to the point where multimillionaires and we still had these money things. And I just said, you know what? I'm not satisfied with how we talk about money. So I'm going to change the relationship. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you should never make changes on your spouse without getting their buy-in. This is called forming a new agreement or updating an agreement. So I pulled my wife's side and I said, honey, seems to me like every time we talk about money, that it's just kind of stressful for you. So, oh, Kris, yes, I don't know what it is. I get stressed paying the bills. Yeah, and sometimes, I just need to make sure there's enough money in the bank account. I said, got it. Okay, I'd like to create some new rules. I'm not imposing these, I'm suggesting these, and it's up to you to determine whether you'll embrace them or not. I'd like to create something new. She said, what does that look like? I said, number one, I'm going to put X amount extra money in our checking account. You'll never have to worry whether there is or isn't enough money ever again. She lit up like a Christmas tree. She was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I was like, you like it so far, right? Just hang tight. I said, rule number two, you're going to put everything on auto pay because now we have this money in the bank account. If everything's on auto pay, you don't have to pay bills. And that will make you happy. And trust me, that'll make me happier and probably luckier in bed. Can you follow rule number two? She said, yes. I said, great. Here's rule number three. I'm in charge of money from here on out, not you. You will have full transparency. I will explain anything that you want to, but you will now be out of all of the minutiae and the details and the decision making. If I want to buy this company, if I want to buy these properties, if I want to do this thing, I'm just going to do it. Because I'm the primary and you're the secondary. And when I have these conversations with you, they're not my happiest conversation on the planet. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a quarterly meeting with you where the board will meet. And then I will give you an update on everything that's happening. And in between, when you have questions, full transparency, you can look at the bank accounts, you have them on your phone, you can look at and ask anything that you want. When she agreed, it was like...
So she agreed to this?
Not only did she agree, but it was like she shook off this burden because I didn't understand that she felt like we carried this together. And I said, it's now mine. I got it. I said, now do you really trust me? No false yes this time. She said, Kris, I trust you. I said, you know that we'll never miss a payment, right? She's like, I know we'll never miss a payment. You realize that our net worth only grows, right? She's like, I totally see that. You see that our cash flow only expands, right? Yes, I see that, Kris. I'm like, great. I'm in charge. I'm going to call the shots. I'm going to make the decisions, and I'm not going to counsel with you on the decisions that I'm making that are day to day. Every quarter you can come in, and then when you have curiosities, you can bring them up, and I'll always take the time as long as you want. But the reality is you have very little patience to sit down and understand and ask more than a handful of questions anyway. It messes with your energy. Let me just show you the bank accounts more or less going up. We made that decision, I think, it was like 8 or 9 years ago. And there have been 3 moments in the last time since then when I watched her get anxietous for one reason or another about money. And I looked at her and I said, you're not allowed to feel that way. She said, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm in charge of money. She's like, okay, so we can buy this thing, right? I'm like, yep, you can buy this thing. It's like, okay, so we're good. I'm like, we're 100% good. So she would bring the stress upon herself. And I think that's going to be relatable to a lot of people watching this because one of the two of you behave that way if you want a healthy dynamic. just know that one of the things you should, everyone, by the way, and I hate to shoot on people, I'm going to shoot on you right now. There are some things in life that everyone should feel high pressure to get good at. And one of them is understanding money, taking action on money, and learning how to make money more well than just having a job. You should not trust your investment advisors and brokers to make decisions for you. You should be allocating your money. You should be doing the research, and you should seek to master the game of money. Anyone who doesn't will be a victim to less than they want when retirement rolls around.
Kris, I feel like this scarcity around money is very, very common in people, where they get nervous and they feel like this need to have a buffer, and where like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million will never be enough. They'll still feel like, oh no, I'm not safe because I don't have money.
That's because of the wiring of their brain, and there's no amount of money that will ever satisfy that for some people.
So I guess what I'm wondering is like, what do you do about that in a marriage? What if there's two people that feel that way?
Well, if you have two people that are reckless action takers, it's going to end poorly. And if you have two people that are financially security minded, then it's also going to end poorly. So I feel like your strongest marriage is going to be built on someone that says, I am taking upon myself to learn the game of money, to get good at making money, and I hope to have your support in that game. And then we're going to go in as best as we can with that support, and we're going to deploy an upgraded system, for building wealth.
So, and that's a perfect segue into my next question, Kris. Why is scarcity such a bad thing to have when you're trying to master the game of
Well,
money?
I think scarcity is a really good thing when you're stupid and dumb and uneducated and don't know what you're doing.
Okay.
I think it's a really bad thing when it's finally time to make your move.
Okay.
Just for a moment, try this on. I want you to think about the money that you have in your bank account right now for your sleep well at night account, or what many call their emergency fund, right? You have an emergency fund? Mm-hmm. Is there an amount of money that you need to have there is it to make you happy or your wife happy?
My wife.
Okay, it's for your wife. Good. And then let me ask you, currently, do you have, based on how much is in there, is it the ideal amount that you want in there? Or is it less than the ideal amount? Or is it more than the ideal amount?
It's way more. It's money sitting waiting to be deployed. We're in abundance.
Okay, so you're sitting in abundance. So this is a principle that I want everyone to understand, is everyone has an amount of money that they need sitting in the bank to feel a peace of mind. This is called satisfaction. If that number is 3,000 for some of you, it might be 10,000 for another, it might be $1 million for another. My number in the beginning was literally $5,000, and then it grew to 10 grand, and then it grew to 25 grand, then it grew to 100 grand, then it grew to $500,000, then it grew, and it's 7 figures right now. Mm-hmm. It's multiple 7 figures. And I want to say something about that number. When you meet that number, you feel satisfaction. When you are below that number, you feel fear and anxiety. Uh-huh. You feel the scarcity. And scarcity is a horrible energy to create from. If you have more than you need, you feel abundance. And it's so important that when it comes to money in the bank for your emergency fund, that you at least are at satisfaction. Satisfaction really is the goal, because anything less will mess with your brain. And especially with the less dominant financial partner between the two of you, their brain is really going to be messed with over and over and over again. And so it's not just your peace of mind, it's more about their peace of mind. In fact, let me ask you, the money that you need for that, is that more than you would need it to be? Is it more based on?
It's definitely my number.
Your number's smaller.
My number's really small.
Yeah. And her number, and by the way, for your peace of mind, you're meeting her number so that she's satisfied, because the last thing you need is her nagging, bothering, irritated, irritable. I mean, dude, there was a time in my life when I was doing well enough with money that I ended up filling my house with assistants. We have like a Kris Krohn power team at home that basically make food and drive kids around and keep our house organized. I do that for my wife's sanity, because when my wife is happier, bliss is happier. And so I do that for her so that bliss gets a positive impact.
Okay. So you said scarcity in the beginning is a good thing. But as you develop it, how do you shift out of that scarcity mode?
I think scarcity should be used to actually get some savings in place. Just like a child that's about to run in the road and doesn't understand that there's traffic coming. Mm-hmm. I hope that scarcity has a place in saying, hey, we're not safe. There's any number of things that could go wrong that could financially hurt us right now. And let the more worrier of the two inspire the less worrier of the two to set money aside until the more worrier of the two can feel better. So that's where scarcity has a really positive role, is to get us into safe boundaries. Once you're in safe boundaries, however, you have to shift the operating system, and then you have to shift from the less worrier of the two to tackle the game of money and learn how to invest, because 401ks and IRAs aren't going to ultimately get you where you want to go. You have to master the game of money. So one of the two of you has to be learning it and implementing and practicing it with now the abundance and the excess, because you've now met those minimum standards. If you can manage doing, Carson, both of those things in that order, that's going to be your healthiest approach to ultimately allowing both of you to be pleased. For my wife and I, here's what it looked like. I set money aside in the bank to make my wife happy in the beginning. But then guess what? I wasn't happy until I was financially free. So I said, now it's your turn. Support me in buying this home. Well, I'm nervous. Support me anyway. Bought another one, bought this business, did this thing. And then we got to the point where I had all this money and I was in Jamaica celebrating retirement. I was 27 years old. My wife was pregnant with our second child. And we were walking on the beach to this romantic dinner that was being set up at sunset for us. Right on the beach. It was really, really, really beautiful. She had just spent hours having her hair braided by these women doing the really tight braids, and she looked sexy and beautiful. And I remember in that moment, she turned to me on the beach right before we got to dinner, and it was this romantic moment. The sun is setting. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can smell the romance in the air. This is amazing. And I remember she turned to me and said, well, Kris, what are you going to do with your life now? And what it did is it opened up a new chapter for the two of us. I met her needs by having a sleep well at night account, emergency fund that made her feel satisfied and abundant. I then invested everything above and beyond that so that I could be free with my time back and having the money to live the life that I wanted. And then it was time for us to embark on something new. So satisfy both of your needs. Do it in that correct order. And then you get to move on to a better life. Don't let money be the definer in your marriage and your relationship. You don't have to fight over it. You don't have to struggle over it. Just meet the worry wart first, then meet the person that doesn't want to, give the rest of their life to a job they may not believe in, if you're like 85% of most people. And then figure it out so you can grow from there into living a beautiful, abundant life.
So Kris, I know that Have It All, your book that just came out, it was not designed as this, but it really can be used as a tool for people to get on the same page of how money can
it's a
work
philosophy.
in your marriage.
It's a philosophy that can even help you achieve realistic financial freedom in under 5 years.
Right.
And whether someone wants to go slow and take 10 or 15 years, the reality is it's designed to put couples into a similar mindset on the same page, supporting each other on a path that has a shot at getting them where they want to go.
And so because of that and the topic that we're discussing today, I just wanted to give a shout out. Hit up kriskrohn.com/have-it-all. Get your copy of the book. Printed versions are being delayed due to, all sorts of supply chain stuff, but we're providing digital version. It's also available on Audible if you want to do the audio version. But that's a really great way to get on the same page with money and with your spouse and figure out what your goals are moving forward. It helps you get an idea of what your game plan should look like Kris said, to be financially free in 5 years.
Gotta say, man, that was a labor of love. It was 3 straight days of recording that audiobook, most painful experience of my life, but we poured every ounce of love, passion, and energy. We did it proud. And I enjoy a really good audiobook. I think people really enjoy the audiobook.
Yeah, it's got all sorts of great reviews. So check it out, kriskrohn.com/have-it-all.